Russia unleashed a barrage of deadly attacks on cities across Ukraine, hitting the heart of the country's capital, after a wave of strikes against civilians and infrastructure not seen since the very earliest days of the war. Russia's former president Dmitry Medvedev said, "This is the first episode. There will be others." From Lviv in the west to Kharkiv in the northeast, missiles tore through rush-hour traffic and into energy facilities. After a series of humiliating setbacks that have piled pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin, the attack suggested an escalation that showed Moscow retained the capacity to terrorize Ukraine's population ahead of winter, if not defeat its military. Ukrainian President Zelensky said in a recorded video that Ukrainian cities have been attacked by Russian missiles and drones, targeting civilians and energy facilities throughout the country. He said they want panic and chaos. They want to destroy our energy system. They are hopeless, adding that the timing and targets of the attacks signal Moscow wanted to cause as much damage as possible. Additionally, Prime Minister said 11 important infrastructure facilities were damaged in 8 regions of the country and the capital, and Ukrainians need to be prepared for temporary interruptions in the supply of electricity and water. The blast came hours after Putin accused Ukraine of terrorism after the bridge connecting Russia and Crimea was severely damaged in a huge explosion that dealt a strategic and symbolic blow to the Kremlin. Putin directly blamed Ukraine's special services for the attack. A series of failures on the battlefield and the chaotic call-up of hundreds of thousands of military reservists have led to growing criticism of the Kremlin at home, with some prominent figures urging escalation in an effort to reverse the course of the conflict. The Kerch Bridge is important to Russia strategically, as a military supply line to its forces in Ukraine, and symbolically as an emblem of its claims on Crimea. No one has claimed responsibility for damaging the 19-kilometer-long bridge, the longest in Europe. Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister Dmytro Kuleba said on Twitter that Russia continues its missile terror against civilians in Zaporizhzhia. 12 strikes on residential areas overnight, at least 12 killed and many more wounded. We urgently need more modern air and missile defense systems to save innocent lives. I urge partners to speed up deliveries. Moreover, he called Putin a terrorist who talks with missiles. Ukraine's Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov called for the country's Western allies to step up their supply of anti-aircraft and anti-missile systems, as the best way to respond to what he said was Russian missile terror. On the other side, the bodies of Russian soldiers lay scattered throughout recaptured villages as the battle for eastern Ukraine is intensifying and Kyiv's forces try to advance into the Luhansk region. Thousands of Russian soldiers have retreated from the frontline area in recent days, leaving behind major destruction. Bomb craters, burned-out vehicles and corpses are strewn along roads leading towards the eastern front. After the Russian retreat from the village of Torsk in the Donetsk region, Russian military uniforms were seen hanging in abandoned homes that soldiers had commandeered. Russian soldiers had been dug in at positions in Torsk just a few days ago, but they've now been replaced by Ukrainian troops patrolling the streets. Moreover, Russia's former president Dmitry Medvedev said Russia's retaliatory mass strikes across Ukraine were only the first episode. He said, "The first episode has been played. There will be others," adding that the future goal should be the complete dismantling of Ukraine's political regime. Recently, Russian President Vladimir Putin recognized the independence of occupied Kherson and Zaporizhzhia in Ukraine as a prelude to absorbing those regions as well as Donetsk and Luhansk into Russia. He said any attack on the areas would be considered an attack on Russia. He sent the signals of his new invasion plans during this period. In a speech in Moscow, Putin said that people in the 4 territories will become Russian citizens forever. He said, "The people have made their choice. This is the will of millions." He also said that the citizens of those regions have a love for Russia. Putin called the annexation non-negotiable and permanent. He'd accused the West of trying to rob Russia and turn its people into a crowd of voiceless slaves. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov announced that attacks on the areas that Putin annexed would be considered an attack on Russia, which means Putin's move could result in a rapid ramping up of the war. The Russian forces held highly stage-managed votes in parts of Ukraine's Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia regions under its control, claiming locals had overwhelmingly voted to join Russia by margins of up to 99%. Ukraine and its Western allies have refused to accept the sham referendums, which were in some cases run by armed brigades that brought ballot boxes to locals' homes. The exact details of Russia's annexation are unclear, but it appears that Russia is laying claim to about 109,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, or about 18%, in addition to Crimea, which Russia annexed in 2014. If Russia could establish control over the whole area it claims, Putin would have annexed around 136,000 square kilometers, or more than 22% of Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged a military response to Russia's annexation effort. He said, "The territorial integrity of Ukraine will be restored, and our reaction to Russia's recognition of their results will be very harsh. Everyone in the world understands very well what such an attempt at annexation would actually mean. It will not mean what the Kremlin hopes for. The price of the fact that one person in Russia wants to continue this war will mean that the entire Russian society will be left without a normal economy, without a decent life, and without regard for any human values." The Ukrainian president urged Russians, and in particular its ethnic minorities in the Caucasus region and Siberia, who were protesting against forced mobilization into Russia's army to resist Putin. U.S. President Joe Biden called Russia's efforts to annex occupied parts of Ukraine shameless. He said the United States will never recognize Russia's claim on Ukraine's sovereign territory. European Commission spokesperson Dana Spinant said, "We will never accept any annexation of territory or any land grabbing by Russia. We are ready to make the Kremlin pay a hefty price for this new escalation in the conflict." Furthermore, Zelensky has announced that Ukraine is officially applying for membership in NATO. In a speech filmed outside his presidential office in Kyiv, Zelensky said he was taking this decisive step in order to protect the entire community of Ukrainians. He promised the application would happen in an expedited manner. He said, "We are de facto allies already. De facto, we have already proven compatibility with alliance standards. Ukraine is applying to confirm it de jure by an expedited procedure." UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said any annexation of a country's territory based on the use of force violates the UN Charter and international law. He said, "It is a dangerous escalation that has no place in the modern world." Similarly, NATO accused Putin of provoking the most serious escalation of the war in Ukraine since it began, but said he would not succeed in deterring the alliance from supporting Kyiv. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, "We have the combination of the mobilization in Russia, combined with the reckless, dangerous nuclear rhetoric, and then today's illegal annexation or attempt to annex parts of Ukraine." Russia has used its veto at the United Nations Security Council to scuttle a draft resolution that sought to condemn its annexations of Ukrainian territory. But even Moscow's close friends China and India chose to abstain rather than vote against the resolution that condemned the Kremlin's latest actions in Ukraine. China abstained from voting on the resolution, but also raised concerns about a prolonged and expanded crisis in Ukraine. Putin recently said China's leader Xi Jinping had concerns about Ukraine.